Welcome back to EB Insights. I'm Sandra Dreyer, and I am super excited to share this episode with everybody today. My guest today is Brian Fink. He is the talent acquisition partner at McAfee. Brian is also an author and has amazing stories and examples around candidate experience and not only the impact it has on talent acquisition, but overall in your employer brand as well. He is super knowledgeable, very entertaining, and this is the first of a two-part series. I hope you enjoy. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to EB Insights, the podcast for anyone who is interested in talent acquisition, talent branding, employee engagement, and all of those kinds of fun topics. And today I am super excited. I have a very fun, energetic guest today. His name is Brian Fink. He is a talent acquisition partner at McAfee, which I'm sure everyone listening to this is familiar with. It's probably running on your machines right now. Brian has held similar roles at other really tiny companies called Twitter and AWS. So he's had a lot of experience with many companies in talent acquisition and has a wealth of knowledge and expertise to share with us. I'm going to let him talk a little bit more about his background. But Brian is also an experienced speaker and a consultant. He's got his passion, I would say, is building really robust recruitment strategies so that you can build talent pipelines and really, especially around diverse talent and diverse talent attraction. So I'm excited to delve into that a little bit deeper. And one of the areas I hope we get to toward the end of the podcast as well is that he's also a published author, which I still have on my bucket list as I have yet to do. He has had two books that I've seen, and I'm sure he's got many in the works, but one of them is Talk Tech to Me. That really strikes home to me as well because it's talked, I think you dubbed it the non-technical guide to technology recruiting. And having been in that space of needing to do technology recruiting and not being a techie, that was very poignant to me. And then another book, which is a bit of a departure from that, which is The Main Thing is the Main Thing. So this book is a deep dive into kind of how to focus on what's really important in your life among all of many life's distractions. I want to go into that a little bit later, so I'll pause it there. But Brian, welcome to the podcast, and I'm excited to have you talk to our audience today.
Well, I'm excited to have a conversation with your audience. It's something that I enjoy. It's something that brings a certain rigor and introspection to myself. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. I am Brian Fink. I did write two books. I am working on the proverbial sequel to Talk Tech to Me. What I think people need to know, though, is that I enjoy bringing people together to solve complex problems, build great products, and get things done. You mentioned a number of the different experiences I've had. I've had experiences recruiting agencies, startups, mid-sized private equity-backed companies, enterprise, household names like Twitter and Apple. What I want people to know is no matter what the size of the organization I work for is or worked for, my emphasis is in helping people go from better to best. So if I am sitting here having a conversation with your audience, I am motivated intrinsically by the idea that we are going to play a critical role in building and growing their professional capacities today, really stretching their professional capacities, helping them go next level. I would be remiss if I did not mention or shout out a few of my mentors who might be listening to this. Because I refer to them as the four Steves, Steve Levy, Steve Rath, Steve Fink, and the spiritual guidance, if you will, of Steve Jobs. I like to think they're the people who keep me curious, empathetic, tenacious, and mischievous. I mean, look, here's the thing, is as employer brand professionals or as recruiting professionals, which I think there's much more intersection than people give credit or credence to, is that you're looking at a really unique setting where we don't have to play by quote unquote the rules of HR. We can take our hand off the handbrake, if you will. We can go into the turn in third gear as opposed to driving in second. We can do a lot of different things, right? And it's that dynamicism, that ability to do those different things that sometimes gets confused with mischievousness. I like to think it might be placed in the bucket of curiosity, empathy, and tenacity to go the distance, to go hard, to push harder than you've pushed before, and to really bring that authentic message to the individual you're trying to connect with in a real, genuine way.
100%. It's the human side of employment. I mean, it's trying to attract individuals by deeply going into what is important to them, and they are individuals, they're not groups of people. So what really got you into talent attraction? What was your sort of evolution into that?
I got pissed off. I mean, that's the honest answer to it is that I was going through the process of trying to become a pharmaceutical sales representative, and I kept going through the process, and I would have really great experiences, and then I would have not great candidate experiences. Or I would get there and say, this company is nothing like the values that they purport to be or that they're quizzing me on. Instead, it's a much different environment. And one day I had an interaction with a young lady where she told me that I wasn't qualified to be a pharmaceutical sales representative. And I had gone through all the processes. I was actually there to meet with the hiring manager for the role. And I had a real bad candidate experience. I went to a gentleman named Jeff Audette, who was running the staffing company Vanguard. And so I sat down with Jeff and we started hammering out what it would be like if we could create a better candidate experience and how that would domino into creating a better experience for his customers, his clients, his pharmaceutical clients, his sales recruiting clients, and the candidates in general, how they would go further in the process, how it would reduce time to fill, how it would increase quality of hire, all these things that are kind of esoteric to us still today, 20 years later, that we're still trying to butt up against, right? And Jeff says, I really like you, but I don't have the budget to hire you. And I said, I mean, wait a minute. We've done all this investment, and now we're not going to pull the trigger. And I said to him, I said, let me come to work for you, and if in 90 days I don't turn around your worst performing territory, you just cut me, and we'll go our separate ways, and we'll say this was nice and this worked out. 120 days later, I turned around his worst performing territory in New Orleans, Houston, and Dallas. I was able to build momentum and traction in Fort Lauderdale and Miami, and then I was able to cap it off with Orlando, Jacksonville, and Tampa. And those were the markets that I ran for several years with Jeff at Vanguard. And that's kind of what kicked it all off. The other important bookend story to the Vanguard story is there was a client that we had. Natalie Malin Davis was the recruiter for that client, and Natalie, we had done a retained search for her, and at the end of the 90-day guarantee, everybody's popping bottles of champagne. We're excited. We've earned our fee. Well, on the 91st day, Natalie gives me a call and says, hey, we've decided to part ways with this individual. We don't think that they're coachable and trainable, and we don't think that there's a resolution here. And I said, okay, I'm going to redo the search. And at that time, people weren't redoing searches. They weren't, especially on the 91st, 92nd day, they were like, we're good. And I sat down and I tried to get my recruiters to work with me on that search, and they all turned their backs on me, right? So as I say, they turned their backs on me. I was prospecting salespeople. I was for Natalie, and I was able to bring her a search to fruition, or bring her search to conclusion with a successful hire in 3 to 4 weeks. Consequently, she called Jeff and she said, hey, you guys went the extra mile for me. I'm going to put more of my budget towards using Vanguard. That was the reciprocal effect, right? But the effect that most notably needed to take place is that if my wife has not taught me anything, it's that you have to delight every person that you come in contact with. She was a big believer at the time. She was working for ADP, and she wanted to deliver magical experiences for ADP customers the same way that Disney creates magical experiences for families, right? They're selling magic, and that's what I wanted to be able to sell and be able to provide to Natalie. So those are the bookends to how I got started.
That's amazing. I love that story because it comes from you having experienced something and wanting to change that experience. So approaching it because you came to it from a candidate experience perspective, because you had been through a negative experience, I came into employer brand, which didn't exist then, but it sat within talent acquisition. I'd never recruited a person in my life other than doing final hiring interviews, because I came from a marketing and a branding perspective. And I was thinking, how are you making this old stuffy brand of an accounting firm sexy and attractive to a bunch of college students, and using the branding that you're using to a CEO who you're selling an audit to. So I came to it from a perspective of being able to solve that problem that was not just selling a job to a person. It was selling an experience from a branding perspective, and yours was selling an experience from the human perspective of having gone through this. Because you sometimes, I think, in the processes, and when you look at recruiters and the recs that recruiters have, and what they need to hit, it is that ability that you were just describing of, hey, stop, this isn't working. I know we're in day X. We have to refigure this because we're not seeing something. And that's a brave thing to do. To pick that thread just a little further, for people who are listening to this, and we're not in the highest economy right now, and hopefully things will turn around, but being able to take those moves of rattling the cage a bit to say maybe what we're doing isn't hitting the right note. What made you go down that road? What was the sort of, kind of impetus to say, I know this is the right thing. I know this isn't going to be the popular thing, but not only do I need to do this, I need to convince a lot of people to let me do this. What does it take to get to that place? Because there might be some people listening to this that are kind of in that same sort of place right now.
So, there are a few things that you have to do. One person I'm going to point to, and they're a branding expert, is Gary Vaynerchuk. Gary Vaynerchuk talks all the time about taking inventory of self, knowing who you are, what you're doing, why you're doing, what is your why, what is your motivation. I talked about at the beginning of this conversation that my motivation is to take people from better to best. About 20 years ago, I said I wanted to be the great connector. Well, guess what? Newsflash, LinkedIn is the great connector, right? It is the one who changed that game of arbitrage. But I say arbitrage because that's playing transactional with different peoples and their relationships, right? What I realized is that it was important to me to bring about a systematic change where people were not treated like pieces on a chessboard or checkers on a checkerboard, right? Is that I wanted people to feel something. I wanted people to feel what I felt, right? How many recruiters are giving feedback, whether it's great, and I equate great with actionable feedback, or are they simply sending out a message that says better luck next time? That's a huge gap for employer branding. So when you ask me why I did it, I am motivated by the intrinsic belief that it is my responsibility to take people from better to best, no matter what situation, circumstances you're in, right? That is something that I'm trying to imbue in my daughter, that she treats individuals with kindness and curiosity, that she leads with empathy. Here we go down the four Steves again, right? And that tenacity that once you finish, it's an infinite game that you play, that you continue. The goalpost is constantly moving, right? So in an economy such as this, I'd go back to the original comment that I made. Get real with yourself. Ask yourself, what are you afraid of? What is keeping you awake at night? What problem do you deeply want to solve? Can you play matchmaker with that problem, right? Okay, like Natalie 20 years ago had a problem that she couldn't get a salesperson to stick with this organization, right? Her problem became my problem because it was going to impact the viability of the company. No, it became my problem because I said I was going to deliver on something, and it was my word that was my bond, and that's what I played upon then, and that's what I play to the strength now. So I go back to a third carrot that I dropped in that sentence, is that find the challenge that excites you, right? Don't think that you want to be a software engineer, and I recruit software engineers because they make a lot of money, okay? Be a software engineer because there's a problem that you want to solve. And if that problem keeps you awake at night, you're never going to work a day in your life, right? Like you're going to keep You're going to keep hammering out at it. I know that I'm going to mention somebody who's unpopular with a lot of people, and that's Elon Musk, right? Is that Elon Musk wants to send people to Mars. He blew up rockets. He blew up 4 rockets before he got one to take off successfully, right? That was his why. That was his mission. And he builds everything around that. What are you building around your problem? Are you building walls that you won't see the problem for what it is? And the problem is truly an opportunity for you to be able to build something momentous.
Yeah, that's amazing. It goes back to you should always do what you're passionate about. And, I know we'll talk a little bit about this hopefully when we get to talk about your book later, but I also love the analogy. And when you were talking initially, this popped in my head, but you just directly said it about even lessons you're trying to teach your own child. My husband and I have had a conversation with my son about, when they, especially when he went through that sort of middle school awkward age of don't try to be the funny one. Don't try to be the class clown. Don't try to be just be the nice one, because for the rest of your life, people will reflect back and think about the ones they had good experiences with. Be the nice guy. Don't worry about trying to be the one who makes the biggest joke in class or who hit the ball the farthest or in baseball. It just be the one that people always have a good experience with. Be the nice one. So I love that you said that because it just kind of resonated. It's the same within candidate attraction or talent acquisition, which is you can have a great experience as a candidate with an employer that doesn't hire you. And to your point, it could be the feedback of you're not right for this position because, or it's not right for you now because. Just getting that feedback, even if it's not the feedback of, yes, we want to hire you, can give you a great interaction with an employer who, by the way, you might work for down the road. You might refer people to apply because of the experience that you had, or you could become a client or a customer of this company. So having those interactions, I think, is so critically important, and I love that you highlighted that. What do you see as having been the biggest changes in this space in the last, say, 5 to 10 years, and what do you see the biggest changes will be in the next 5 to 10 years?
Ooh, okay. So I got a lot of thoughts that I want to unpack on that. The first one is um, there's this guy named Joey Coleman, and look, if this is our first podcast together. You know that I'm going to cite a lot of different books, but Joey
And if
Coleman.
anybody wants to verify that, you can take a look at his bookshelf if he ever posts that because he's got a lot, and it's amazing. He referred even in our last conversation offline when we were chatting, he gave me 3 books to that refer to, and I ordered them because they're all really insightful. So yes, I trust. And actually, as you're talking, I will be linking a lot of these resources in the description notes. So as we talk, just so people know, if you're interested in something that Brian refers to, I'll link that in the show notes below. So go ahead, Brian.
Okay, so Joey Coleman. Joey Coleman wrote 2 books. He may have written more, but I've only read 2 of them. One is Never Lose a Customer Again. And the other book is Never Lose an Employee Again. All right. Both books are case studies or collections of case studies around the thesis that you don't want to lose a customer. You want to turn a customer into a raving fan. You don't want to lose an employee. You want to turn an employee into a raving fan. You want them to go on to be an alumni of your organization that acts or reacts in a bigger way and draws or drafts people back to the organization. So to that, what do I see the biggest change taking place is that I like to look at our organization like McAfee. McAfee was a brand that was associated with enterprise security and personal security. Today, we are only focused on the personal. When you think about the evolution of brands and that brands want to be personified as an individual, right? Like when I say Apple, you think of innovation, you think of luxury, right? Like how it makes you feel. When I talk about McAfee, I want you to think about us, how we make you safe so that you're free to be who you want to be online. When I mention a company like Nike, I want you to be aspired to be a great athlete, right? Those messages are the consumer message. And that I go to what Joey says in his book. He doesn't use the Nike example, but I think about and those examples about how that brand made you feel as a customer and the feeling that it sold you, right? And when we think about feelings, I have to think about Maya Angelou and the quote that's attributed to her. I'm going to mess it up. People will forget what you said. People forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them
Made them
feel.
feel. Yeah, I love
How,
that. Hmm.
how do you feel when you tie on that first pair of on cloud runners and you get on the treadmill or you hit the open road or that first pair of Hokas and they say fly human fly and you want to just take off, or Nike and you feel that you've got the tenacity of Jordan, right? It's how you made you feel, right? So I think that comes back to consumer brands, and I think that really comes back to employer branding about how did that brand make you feel. I want to make sure that everybody that I work with as a candidate at McAfee has a positive experience. For a lot of people, that's a one or a zero. One, I got hired, I had a positive experience. Zero, I had a negative experience. I do not want them to have a negative experience because I do not want them to turn on and say, well, I'm not going to get McAfee. I had a bad experience. And for them to open themselves up to a broader set of threats and nefarious actors online. I want to make sure that they have that type of bespoke experience, even if they're not, even if they're getting a zero instead of that one, right? Which goes to the next point. Recruiters want to be in the yes business. We want to tell everybody yes. The reality is that we're in the no business. And employer branding is something that helps us with both the yes business and the no business. Because if you're, apparently there are like 300 applicants for every one hire at Goldman Sachs. So there are a lot of people who aren't getting a job at Goldman Sachs, right? But there are a lot of people who don't want to work at Goldman Sachs. They don't want to embrace an identity different than the identity that they harbor today. So let employer brand say, this place is not for you. It's not an exclusive country club. It's just, hey, we don't wear pink on Wednesdays, right? You can't sit with us. It turns them off. Or let employer branding be so motivating that you want to go work for a company like AWS or Amazon that puts the customer at the center of everything that they do, that they build that creative and drive and that value and that energy, right? Go do that. Go do that thing. So that's how I think employer branding and the candidate experience go hand in hand to create that bespoke consumer experience and really drive that innovation for individuals and for
How
companies too.
Yeah. What is the best way you have seen employer brand embedded into the talent acquisition function? And I guess the reason I'm asking this is because often that just does sit in talent acquisition, although you could argue, and I've argued on other podcasts, that your employer brand really should be part of your employee experience, which isn't something that's owned by talent acquisition as well. But what's the best way you've seen that work? Supporting the work that recruiters are doing, to your point, is it that the messaging is so focused and targeted that the people that your recruiters are interacting with have a much more realistic preview of the work that they would be doing? So maybe it would be a better fit. Is it just being more authentic? Is it being better linked to the consumer brand? What is that interaction you've seen work really well?
So I think that AWS and Amazon do it really, really well. And I don't think they get enough credit for this, right? Is that AWS, they have videos that showcase different individuals from all walks of life who are doing different jobs, right? And you may have three videos about the same job that offer three very different perspectives, right? I think that's great. I also think it's great when companies send interview guides to the candidate saying, hey, by the way, I want you to show up with your best authentic self. This is how the interview is going to proceed. This is what the questions look like. You should be prepared to answer these, right? Because if they're prepared to share the recipe with you, you should be ready to bake the cake. And I think that AWS and Amazon do a great job of that rather than hitting you with I gotcha questions, right? Um, I think it also goes to interview training, right? Training all the interviewers, not just the hiring manager. I mean, let's be honest. It's a hiring manager's responsibility at the end of the day as to how they're going to onboard an individual into the organization. But a lot of those decisions, they're made in a circle, right? They're made at the table where everybody has an equal voice. and there are no hierarchies. So how do you train people to get beyond that bias and to be able to communicate how a person should feel about the brand? Fourth, brand values. Oh man, I could be here all day. I have McAfee's brand values right here on my desk so that I don't forget them. They I ask them in the questions that I ask candidates, right? But I make sure that they're front and center so I never forget those values and what SHIELD means and what it means to stand up for those individuals and to bring great talent and to raise the bar here at McAfee, right? So I think it's those four different areas that you dial into. Do I know who does it best? I still gotta. I have to say that Amazon is still killing it. I think that they do a great job with that. I don't think they get enough call outs. I don't think Virgin and the Virgin brand get enough call outs as to what they do. People want to travel on Virgin. It's a luxury brand. It has unique elements to it, what they serve you at the Virgin Lounge. The same thing could be said about the bespoke experience you get with an American Express card, right? Why can't we deliver those bespoke experiences to candidates? I mean, we live in this age where people are using AI and they're slathering on everything like it's mayonnaise. Nothing against mayonnaise. Love mayonnaise. Yum, yum, yum. Eat it all day long, right? That's going to be the soundbite for this video. Brian going yum, yum, yum about mayonnaise, right? But why don't we use AI in a way that it's transformative, truly transformative to the candidate experience, that it gives us more time to create that bespoke experience, not an automated experience, a bespoke experience. Having that extra 5 minutes to spend with a candidate to say, look, they're going to ask you about curiosity. You need to be able to show to them an instance when you're curious outside of work, what projects you like working on or where you like volunteering some of your time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important too, and mapping to a company's values, which in order to be effective need to be very authentic and lived within the organization. They can't just be slathered up on billboards and things, but also need to really be applicable to the business and the type of business that company does. I think is really, really important. And on that note of bespoke experiences, it really makes me think of even just the way we shop today. I mean, there's almost nothing that I will purchase now that I either haven't been served up because of my searching behaviors or will read reviews on, or there are so many different things that are curated experiences for people as consumers that need to therefore be curated to them as they're shopping for a job and shopping for a potential employer. It is that sort of, is this the type, it goes back to the old views of, can I bring my authentic self to work? Can I be myself at work, or do I have to change myself to be at work? It's such an important non-negotiable, I think, for companies.
So I think that employer brand communicates whether or not you can bring your authentic self to work, right? Like, I go back to the example, nothing against Goldman Sachs, right? Like, I love Goldman Sachs. I have, whatever. I don't know if I love Goldman Sachs. That's a lie. I love Apple. Okay. We're talking on my Apple headphones. I've got my Apple Watch on. When they come out with a new product, I don't hesitate. I go, I get it. I trust. I have that buy-in, right? And we talk about love, right? If Apple did something so repulsive to me, like maybe they embraced Kanye West, right? I haven't mentioned a company that embraced Kanye West on this call. I named every other sports brand that's out there, right? Um, that would make me feel threatened. That would make me feel like that was a brand that I can't identify with, that doesn't speak to my values of inclusivity, right? So I would probably stop or look for an alternative to Apple products because of their stance on that. Well, that's the same way employer branding works, is if it doesn't resonate with you to bring that authentic self, that hardworking, hard charging, high energy environment, you may not want to go to work there, right? Like, we all saw the movie Office Space, which now I'm really dating myself, right? But in Office Space, Jennifer Aniston plays a waitress who works at TGI Friday or whatever variation of TGI Fridays, right? She brought her authentic self to work when she was talking to those tables. She wasn't where those pins or flare or
Blair.
what have you. Yeah, the flare that didn't resonate with her. She rebelled against it. She was anything but that employer brand of flair, of the essential pieces of flair. Employer brand tells you what flair you can bring to work and how you can be included in the conversation. And maybe that leads to a comment that you made at the top of the call, is that how do we make sure that we create company values that deliver on the promise of defining company culture and guiding workers' decisions, even if no, I mean, you can't do that if nobody remembers your values, right? You know, Companies are typically focused on doubling down on communication. The usual advice is to post the core values like I have over here and mention them more often in reports. The hope is it's some kind of repetition, that these core values are going to eventually be drummed into everybody's skull. That's not the case. If you don't want them to stick, you want them to pop. You want them to be energetic. You want them to be something that drives innovation in a company. You want them to be something that encourages people to bring their authentic self to work, right? I read an article the other day that a major auto manufacturer, Toyota, is going to stop its support of LGBTQ pride parades and pride festivals, right? If I was a member of the LGBT community, would I think twice about purchasing a Toyota or working for Toyota, right? When we're making a when we're buying into employer brand, we're making a very important decision. My mother likes to say that there are three really important decisions that you make in your life. One, who you spend your time with. Two, who you marry. And three, what you do with your time. And when she's talking about what you do with your time, she's clearly talking about your job, right? Shout out to mom. Mom, if you're listening, I love you. You know that. Not like Goldman Sachs, like I actually love you. Um, is that the reality of this is that this is an all important decision about how you're going to spend your time, how you're going to identify what you do. In America, we are very driven that people say, "Oh, it's so nice to meet you, Jennifer. Jennifer, what do you do?" They don't ask you, where do you live? Where do you come from? They ask you, what do you do, right? It's such a part of our identity.
Identity,
Why
yeah.
wouldn't why wouldn't we deliver a bespoke, customized experience to speak to that person's values, make sure their identity aligns with the employer brand and the employer vision?
Thank you so much to my guest today, Brian Fink, the talent acquisition partner at McAfee. This was part one of an incredibly engaging conversation that we had, and we will be sharing part two shortly. In the meantime, please check the show notes for some of the resources that Brian referenced on this part of the podcast, as well as links to his book and his bio as well. See you next time.